I was lying in a hospital bed, my eyes red and filled with tears after a phone call from my husband. "Tomorrow, we have guests coming over. You need to come home right away and clean the house." After all the years I had spent sacrificing myself for my family, even after learning from my doctor that I might not have much time left to live, I still wasn't allowed a single moment of peace. And from that moment on, I made a decision. I was going to live a different life, a life I had never been brave enough to try before. In a major hospital in Atlanta, Georgia, a woman sat alone on a bench, quietly watching the world around her. The courtyard was filled with trees, and because it was a Monday, visitors streamed in and out all day to see their loved ones. Their presence softened the heavy atmosphere that usually hung over the hospital. Gloria Johnson sat apart from the crowd. Her frail appearance and distant gaze made her seem almost invisible among the families gathered nearby. The other patients might have been suffering from illness, but they still had relatives and friends standing beside them. Did Gloria have a family? Of course she did. But every family carries its own burdens, and after decades of marriage, Gloria no longer knew if she had truly been living or merely surviving. Preserving the image of a family had cost her more than physical exhaustion. It had drained her spirit as well. As she sat lost in thought, an elderly couple caught her attention. "Oh, stop fussing. I told you I'm not hungry. Just eat a little something. You haven't eaten all day. If I keep forcing myself, I'll end up admitted in here with you. Then eat this plate of food and I'll go home with you afterward." It turned out the husband was the patient, not the wife. The tenderness between them made Gloria unexpectedly envious. At their age, they still cared for each other with such warmth. Gloria probably had at least another 10 years left to live. But if she spent those years trapped inside the marriage she had now, could that really be called living? Or would it simply be existing? She had been married for more than 30 years and had raised 2 sons. Lately, her health had been getting worse. Every so often, she had to visit the hospital for medication. Night after night, violent headaches robbed her of sleep. The pain became so unbearable that she relied on pills just to get through the night. Whenever she described the symptoms, doctors prescribed another round of medication. The medicine dulled the pain temporarily, but nothing ever truly improved. Gloria had long since gotten used to suffering in silence. Pain was something she endured alone. She never wanted to burden anyone else with it. Both of her sons had moved out years ago and built families of their own. They lived far away now, and the house felt emptier than ever. Their lives were stable, their careers secure, and their children growing up well. These days, Gloria lived only with her husband, Curtis Johnson, who was approaching retirement. Curtis owned a large manufacturing company and was widely respected. People admired both his business success and what they believed was a perfect family life. But as the saying goes, no one knows what happens behind closed doors. Alongside all of his achievements came a frightening streak of control and arrogance. Every time Gloria thought about it, fear gripped her chest. It had become embedded so deeply in her mind that she suspected she would carry that fear with her to the very end of her life. By the time she finally looked up from her thoughts, evening had arrived. Gloria hated leaving the hospital grounds. Those precious hours of freedom meant more to her than anyone could imagine. That was why she often chose a longer city bus route home. The ride took more time and it was usually crowded, but being surrounded by people made her feel less alone. When she arrived home, Curtis still wasn't back from work. That was unusual. He normally arrived at exactly the same time every evening, and one of his many expectations was that Gloria should always be home whenever he needed her. It was a ridiculous demand, yet she had followed it faithfully for decades. Despite her exhaustion, she stepped inside and immediately began cleaning and preparing dinner. Curtis expected every meal to include 3 dishes, a main course, vegetables, and soup. He had particular preferences and routines, and Gloria remembered every single one of them. Yet, no one in the family knew her favorite foods, her favorite colors, or the things she enjoyed. While organizing the closet in their bedroom, Gloria noticed a red jewelry store gift box hidden behind a stack of Curtis's clothes. Curious, she opened it. Inside was a beautiful matching set, a necklace, a bracelet, and a pair of earrings. The pieces sparkled under the light, elegant enough to captivate any woman who saw them. Beneath the jewelry sat a card from the store. For a moment, Gloria's heart softened. After all these years, perhaps Curtis had finally remembered the promise he made long ago, to buy her a special piece of jewelry as a symbol of their lasting love. Their wedding anniversary was tomorrow. Maybe this was his surprise. Maybe he had not forgotten after all. The thought alone melted years of disappointment. She carefully returned the jewelry to its place, finished her chores, took a shower, and dressed more nicely than usual. For the first time in a long while, she felt excited waiting for her husband to come home. But she waited and waited. It was nearly 10 o'clock when Curtis finally walked through the door. "Honey, why are you so late tonight? Something happened at work?" Curtis loosened his tie and headed upstairs without really looking at her. We started a new project. Besides, I'm close to retirement. Things aren't as simple as you think. You should slow down. You don't have to push yourself so hard. What would you know about making money? It's not easy. He never even noticed the effort she had made with her appearance. Without another glance, he disappeared into the bathroom. Gloria felt the familiar sting in her chest. Every conversation seemed to circle back to money. Still, she pushed the feeling aside. It wasn't as though this was new. She had been hearing comments like that for years. She reheated dinner and laid everything on the table. Then she sat down and waited for him. Her brief happiness disappeared the moment Curtis came downstairs wearing a different outfit and carrying a bag. "You're not eating at home? I already told you." A client helped secure a partnership with a major national corporation. "I'm taking them out to dinner as a thank you. It's almost 11 o'clock. So?" Gloria followed him toward the door. "What kind of dinner starts this late?" Curtis sighed impatiently. "You wouldn't understand. Important people have busy schedules. We work around their availability. Not everyone spends the day at home cooking and sleeping." The words struck her like a blow. Slowly, her hand slipped from his arm. She stood frozen until the front door closed behind him. Then her knees gave out. As she sat on the floor, a troubling thought began to take shape. Curtis had described the client as talented, accomplished, and busy, everything Gloria was not. Why compare that person to her unless the client was a woman? The more she thought about it, the more frightened she became. Determined to calm her suspicions, she forced herself upstairs and searched through the closet. The jewelry box was gone. Her pulse quickened. How else could she explain it? Her husband had left the house late at night, carrying a gift clearly meant for a woman. At their age, with grown children and grandchildren, could he really be doing something so shameful? Gloria tried desperately to dismiss the thought. No, Curtis might be cold and selfish at times, but surely he wouldn't betray their marriage. If he had wanted an affair, wouldn't he have done it years ago? Yet the missing jewelry box refused to leave her mind. Why would a man give another woman such an intimate gift if there were no feelings involved? The anniversary present she had imagined for herself had suddenly become evidence of something far more painful. Curtis didn't return home until nearly 1 in the morning. Even after showering, the smell of alcohol lingered on him. As soon as he lay down, Gloria spoke into the darkness. "Do you remember what today is?" Curtis stiffened slightly. "You're still awake? You came home a while ago and never said a word." I'm tired." His curt response irritated her. "I'm tired, too. What are you tired from?" he snapped. "I work all day and come home exhausted. Then I have to deal with that look on your face." "You still haven't answered my question." Curtis pulled the blanket higher. "What question? What day is it? If you know, then tell me. You think I can remember every little thing? I've got a company to run." Gloria turned away from him. "Last week I saw you carrying a jewelry box. Who was it for?" For a split second, Curtis hesitated. But decades in business had taught him how to think fast. "You're imagining things again. A coworker asked me to pick something up for her. I gave it to her days ago." "Why are you asking such strange questions?" Then he added casually, "Besides, you've never even liked jewelry." There it was. Another lie. First it was a client, now it was a coworker. Every instinct Gloria possessed told her that her husband's loyalty was no longer intact. The possibility felt almost absurd. They were grandparents. Their children were grown. Yet the man who had always been the pillar of their family seemed to have one foot outside the marriage, searching for excitement somewhere else. A cold emptiness spread through Gloria's heart. She had spent her entire life sacrificing for this family. In more than 30 years of marriage, she had never crossed a line, never betrayed his trust, never put herself first. Curtis spoke, and she obeyed. She devoted herself completely to raising their sons and maintaining their home. To everyone around them, she was simply a wife and mother. The household functioned because of her, yet nobody seemed to notice. She had tried hard to raise her children differently from their father. She wanted them to value kindness and emotion, not power and control. Unfortunately, she had never managed to escape her own shadow. Curtis's influence shaped both boys. As they grew older, they learned to suppress emotion and prioritize success. Money became the answer to every problem. Their father taught them that respect came from achievement and status. Because of that, they saw Gloria as outdated. A woman who spent her life inside the house and knew nothing about the real world. They were proud of their father, the successful business owner everyone admired. Their mother was simply the person who cooked meals and kept the home running. What none of them understood was that Curtis had built their marriage on control from the very beginning. When they were newly married, he insisted Gloria stay home while he pursued his career. He never gave her a real choice. Dependence became her reality. Little by little, she clipped her own wings and nestled herself inside the life he created for her, never realizing that the storm waiting for her would come not from the outside world, but from within her own home. She had placed all of her trust, all of her dreams and her entire future into one man. Looking back, it might have been the greatest mistake of her life. Modern women were different. They built careers, earned their own money, and stood on their own feet. Loneliness motivated them to become stronger. They didn't have to rely on anyone else for survival. Gloria had never been given that opportunity. Time, circumstance, and fate had pushed her onto a very different path. Beside her, Curtis drifted peacefully to sleep. Gloria remained awake. Her thoughts churned like a storm. The headache returned, sharper than ever. She reached for her medication, knowing she depended on it far too much but seeing no alternative. She swallowed the pills and lay back down. As she stared into the darkness, she remembered the loving words spoken by the elderly husband she had seen at the hospital earlier that day. Perhaps that brief moment of tenderness would become the sweetest dream of her night. Perhaps it was also the dream she had been chasing her entire life. Gloria Johnson was born into an ordinary family. Her parents gave her the name Gloria because they hoped she would grow into a woman surrounded by love, grace, and happiness. In her earliest years, life was exactly that. Her parents adored their beautiful, gentle daughter and gave her everything they could. But life had different plans. When Gloria was still a child, her father followed the advice of a distant relative and invested nearly everything he had into a real estate venture that turned out to be a scam. The company vanished, taking countless investors' money with it. While authorities investigated the case, Gloria's family waited desperately, hoping to recover their savings and the house they had mortgaged to survive. The wait dragged on for years, and little by little it destroyed her father. The stress turned him bitter and violent. He lashed out at his wife, screamed at his daughter, and drowned himself in alcohol and gambling. He stopped trying to rebuild his life and left Gloria's mother to carry the burden of supporting the family alone. Her mother suffered just as much. After exhausting days at work, she returned home only to find her husband drunk, angry, and impossible to reason with. No matter how hard she worked, she was rewarded with insults and sometimes physical abuse. She endured it for as long as she could. But when Gloria was in first grade, her mother disappeared. The only thing she left behind was an unsigned divorce petition. Gloria was still very young, but she understood far more than most children her age. She stopped asking for things. She worked hard in school. She never complained. Yet nothing could erase the pain of being abandoned by her mother, while her father barely seemed to notice her existence. Relatives from both sides of the family kept their distance, afraid her father would ask them for money he could never repay. Even after his wife left, Gloria's father refused to change. Fortunately, the authorities eventually shut down the fraudulent company and returned part of the money to the victims. By then, however, Gloria's mother was long gone. Not long afterward, her father remarried. He claimed he wanted Gloria to have a complete family again, but the truth was that he was pursuing his own happiness. He treated his new wife with affection and devotion, and when they later had a son together, he became convinced the boy was the blessing his life had been missing. Their finances improved dramatically. The relatives who had once avoided them suddenly became friendly again. Within 3 years, the family moved into a large new house several miles away from their old neighborhood. Many people might expect a typical stepmother story at this point, but that was not what happened. Gloria's stepmother never abused her. She never yelled at her or treated her cruelly. She was simply indifferent. Gloria's father was the same way. It was almost as if they both viewed her as a reminder of a painful chapter they wanted to forget. For someone as emotional and loving as Gloria, being treated like an outsider in her own home hurt more than any harsh words ever could. She clung tightly to the memories from before everything fell apart. She remembered riding on her father's bicycle when she was little, stopping for ice cream, and eating simple dinners with both parents at the table. Those memories became treasures she carried in her heart. Most of all, she believed her mother would return one day. That belief never left her. For years, she visited the old house where her mother had once lived, hoping to see her walk through the door again. She repeated that ritual for more than a decade without ever giving up. The happiness adults chased often became the deepest pain their children carried. Anyone who grew up with divorced parents would understand exactly how lonely that little girl felt. Gloria met Curtis when she was 20 years old. He was handsome, charming, and attracted attention wherever he went. Most women were fascinated by him, but Gloria seemed completely unimpressed. Ironically, that only made him more interested. The more time he spent with her, the more he admired her kindness. She was quiet, yet constantly looking after other people. Even the smallest gestures from her carried warmth. Curtis learned about her difficult childhood and became determined to protect her from every hurt she had ever experienced. At least, that was what he told himself. What began as affection slowly mixed with possessiveness. He wanted Gloria to belong entirely to him. He wanted to keep her close, away from anything that might take her from him. After college, Gloria married Curtis and immediately became a homemaker. She never had the chance to build a career or use the education she had worked so hard to earn. Before the wedding, her father and stepmother gave her a substantial inheritance fund worth about $25,000. It was a significant amount of money at the time, although not enough to affect her father's growing wealth. In many ways, it felt less like a gift and more like payment for his own peace of mind after finally marrying off the daughter he had long neglected. Like most couples in love, Gloria and Curtis made countless promises to each other. Knowing how hard Curtis worked, Gloria dedicated herself to making his life easier. She cooked elaborate meals, kept the house spotless, and did everything she could to ensure he felt comfortable when he came home. She often claimed she did not care about expensive clothes or jewelry, but deep down, she wanted the same things many women wanted. The difference was that she never felt entitled to ask for them because she was not earning her own money. The memory of her mother abandoning the family haunted her, and she was determined to keep her own marriage intact at all costs. When they first married, they owned little more than a modest house and a used car. Curtis came from a family with limited means and several siblings, so he had to build everything from scratch. When he learned about Gloria's inheritance fund, he asked to borrow the money to start a business. He promised he would repay every dollar once he succeeded. Gloria never hesitated. They were husband and wife. She trusted him completely and saw no reason to separate what was hers from what was his. Curtis was ambitious and hardworking. Within a few years, he built a company with real potential. As the business grew, however, the promise to repay Gloria quietly disappeared. She remembered it, but she never brought it up. To outsiders, Curtis looked like the perfect husband. He was successful, respected, and appeared devoted to his family. People assumed Gloria had an easy life, sitting comfortably at home while her husband provided everything. The reality was very different. Curtis was deeply controlling and obsessed with money. Gloria learned that the easiest way to keep peace in the household was to obey him. As long as she followed his rules, he stayed calm. Whenever jealousy or anger got the better of him and he became abusive, he always apologized afterward. He would hold her, beg for forgiveness, and promise it would never happen again. Over time, Gloria accepted that this was simply who he was. There was a period when she grew tired of spending every day trapped inside the house. Whenever Curtis was at work, she secretly attended cooking classes, learned crafts, and occasionally worked part-time in local kitchens. Earning her own money for the first time filled her with a sense of pride she had never known. The first gift she bought with her own earnings was a red tie for Curtis. She told him she hoped it would bring him luck every time he wore it. For a brief moment, their marriage seemed almost normal. Then she became pregnant. From that point forward, Curtis had the perfect excuse to keep her at home indefinitely. People often joke that marriage was a prison shaped like a heart. For Gloria, it became a prison in the most literal emotional sense. The noise of nurses and doctors moving through the hallway eventually pulled Gloria awake. Apparently, she had developed a fever the night before, but Curtis hadn't even realized something was wrong until he came home from work the following evening. When Gloria opened her eyes, her eyelids felt impossibly heavy. She had only slept for a few hours, yet it felt as though she had relived her entire life in a single dream. Memories she had spent years trying to bury came flooding back with painful clarity. Maybe lying to herself all these years had been the greatest mistake she had ever made. The truth was that no one could make her miserable unless she allowed them to. She had endured enough. Her husband was nearing retirement, both of her sons had successful families, and the business empire Curtis spent decades building already had heirs waiting to inherit it. For the first time in her life, Gloria allowed herself to imagine a different future. After the doctors finished their examinations and left the room, she finally became aware of the family gathered around her bed. "Mom, are you okay?" Jason was the first to speak. As always, he sounded genuinely concerned. "The doctor already explained it," he added. "Just some age-related issues. A little rest and you'll be fine." "That's right," Jasmine quickly agreed. "Maybe I can order some imported medication from Germany. I've heard it works really well." Nicole immediately jumped into the conversation. "Really? You barely check on Mom, and now suddenly you're offering to buy medicine?" She turned toward Curtis. "Dad, I think Mom's problem is loneliness. She stays home by herself all day. Maybe if we brought the grandkids over more often, she'd feel better." "What exactly are you trying to say?" Jasmine shot back. "You act like you're the only one who cares about her." The two daughters-in-law continued arguing, but Gloria knew neither woman was truly concerned about her health. Their competition had more to do with the future leadership of Curtis's company than with the patient lying in the hospital bed. The noise became unbearable. "Did you all come here to visit me?" Gloria finally said, opening her eyes. "Or did you come here to argue?" Five faces immediately turned toward her. "Mom," the room fell silent. Gloria slowly looked around. Three men with remarkably similar features stood on one side of the room. The two women stood nearby, each hiding her own thoughts behind carefully controlled expressions. "Should I call the doctor?" Curtis asked. "No, I want to sleep." "You don't need to sleep. The doctor should take another look." I said no. Her voice remained calm, but the firmness surprised everyone. "You're acting like a child," Curtis muttered. "The kids are all here. Aren't you embarrassed?" Gloria looked directly at him. "I'm their mother, not a stranger. If I want to speak, I'll speak. I don't need your permission." The room froze. Nobody could remember the last time Gloria had spoken to Curtis that way. For decades, she had been known as the quiet one, the peacemaker, the woman who always let things go. Her sons believed years of staying at home had made her weak and indecisive. Neither daughter-in-law had ever taken her particularly seriously. They came from wealthy, influential families and couldn't understand a woman who seemed content to disappear into the background. The most shocked person in the room was Curtis himself. In more than 30 years of marriage, Gloria had challenged him only a handful of times. The last major disagreement happened nearly a decade earlier when one of their sons got married. Curtis wanted the marriage arranged around business advantages and family connections. Gloria fought him on it. Even now, years later, he still remembered that argument. This sudden resistance felt completely different. "Has your fever made you lose your mind?" Curtis snapped. "I'm willing to overlook this because you're sick. While you're lying here, maybe you should spend some time reflecting on your behavior." Nupperal. "You're old enough to know better than to make everyone drop what they're doing and rush to the hospital. Do you realize how much time and money this costs? You spend money. The rest of us make it." The comment wasn't directed only at Gloria. It was also aimed at Nicole and Jasmine, who constantly competed with one another. To Curtis, women who stayed home and were financially supported should know their place. That had always been his philosophy. Years ago, comments like that would have made Gloria question herself. She would search for faults within her own behavior. But something had changed inside her. If you look in a mirror and see a stain, your first thought is that the mirror is dirty. So why do people immediately assume something is wrong with themselves when someone else says hurtful things? For years, Gloria had built her entire identity around Curtis's opinions. In her mind, the family was like a tower. Curtis stood at the top. She and the boys formed the foundation. Remove one piece and everything collapsed. Because of that belief, his words became her guide for how to live. Even though she felt herself slowly dying inside, she never dared disturb the family's fragile balance. But now she was in her 50s. Most people her age wanted peace. Gloria wanted freedom. She knew there was a world beyond the prison she had lived in for decades. She remembered the dreams she once had in her 20s. She remembered wanting more. She had sacrificed enough. She had endured enough. If she continued living this way, she felt she would eventually leave this world without ever having truly lived. Curtis opened his mouth to continue lecturing her. Instead, Gloria interrupted him. "Then bring me the divorce papers. I'll sign them." The silence that followed was even colder than before. The machines beside her bed continued beeping steadily, but nobody moved. Curtis stared at her. Marcus was the first to recover. "Mom, what are you talking about? Even if you're upset with Dad, you can't say things like that." Nicole and Jasmine exchanged looks but remained silent. Neither seemed particularly shocked. If Gloria left the family home, it would not affect their inheritance or their husbands' positions within the company. "Mom," is Jason sitting beside her bed and taking her hand. "You're tired. Please don't say things you'll regret." More than anyone else, Jason had always been the reason Gloria stayed. Marcus was practical and emotionally distant. Everyone assumed he would eventually take over Curtis's company. Jason was different. He was gentle, thoughtful, and compassionate. As a child, whenever Curtis lost his temper and screamed at Gloria, or worse, Jason would stand between them. Even as an adult, he remained fiercely protective of his mother. Her sons now had stable families of their own. They no longer needed her. Maybe it was finally time to let go. Gloria listened quietly while everyone tried to talk her out of it. She kept her face expressionless and waited for Curtis's response. Curtis, meanwhile, was struggling to process what he was hearing. The woman who had obeyed him for decades was asking for a divorce. The woman who had depended on him financially her entire adult life was threatening to walk away. In his mind, the idea was ridiculous. "You want a divorce?" he said with a laugh full of contempt. "Fine, if you're so capable, move out tomorrow, pack your things and leave. I won't stop you." His voice rose sharply, but beneath the anger Gloria could hear something else. Confidence. He genuinely believed she would never do it, and perhaps he was right. She wasn't ready to leave tomorrow, not yet, but she had already begun planning. The divorce itself was no longer negotiable. "Mom's sick," Jason protested. "She's not thinking clearly," Curtis scoffed. "Thinking clearly? She spent her entire life inside that house. She doesn't know anything about the real world." Then he turned toward Gloria. "You live in my house, you spend my money. Maybe you should remember that before you start talking back to your husband. Every word felt like a knife. Gloria clenched her jaw so tightly it hurt. She refused to cry. If she showed weakness, nobody in that room would take her seriously. The sacrifices she had made, the years she had given, the dreams she had abandoned, none of it seemed to matter. To Curtis, she was little more than a housekeeper with a wedding ring. At that moment, the hospital room door swung open. A nurse stepped inside with a look of irritation. "Please keep your voices down," she said firmly. "Other patients have complained. Only those who need to be here should stay." "Understood," Marcus replied. "Thank you." The interruption finally ended the argument. One by one, the family members began leaving. The three men returned to work. Nicole left to pick up her children. That left only Jasmine. The room became quiet again. Gloria closed her eyes, hoping to get some rest. Her head still throbbed. Her ears rang constantly, and her vision seemed weaker than before. Those symptoms had been worsening for nearly a year now, though she assumed they were simply part of aging. Across the room, Jasmine sat peeling fruit in silence. Eventually, Gloria spoke. "You should go. I'm feeling better." "No, Mom, don't waste your time sitting here. Jason asked me to stay." Gloria smiled faintly. "You make it sound like you're afraid of him." Jasmine laughed awkwardly. "Why would you say that? You listened to him very carefully." Gloria looked out the window. "If he's ever too stubborn, don't be afraid to stand your ground. Marriage requires compromise. Jason is a good man, but he can be hot-tempered sometimes, just like his father." Jasmine nodded. "I know." For a moment, neither woman spoke. Gloria watched a pair of birds outside flying freely through the afternoon sky. She envied them. Before getting married, Jasmine had never paid much attention to her mother-in-law. As a modern woman, she could never imagine accepting the kind of life Gloria had lived. But marriage had taught her that life was rarely as simple as people imagined. Before settling down, she traveled whenever she wanted, shopped whenever she felt like it, and spent time with friends without restrictions. Marriage changed everything. Her world became smaller. Fortunately, she loved her husband, and he treated her well. Still, seeing Gloria now made her curious. "Can I ask you something?" Gloria turned toward her. "Of course. Were you serious earlier? About what? The divorce?" Jasmine immediately looked embarrassed. "You don't have to answer if you don't want to. It's fine." Gloria smiled faintly. "Do you think it's strange?" Jasmine hesitated. "You've lived much longer than I have. I'm sure your reasons are valid." "That wasn't an answer." "Well," Jasmine said carefully, "you asked for my honest opinion." "I did. Then yes, I think there must be a reason. People don't suddenly decide to leave a marriage after 30 years without one." Gloria nodded slowly. "Go on. You told me to be honest, remember?" Jasmine sat quietly for a moment before finally speaking. "I think it's completely understandable, Mom." Gloria looked at her with surprise. "Understandable? Yes. Anything that happens in life, whether it's good or bad, will always divide people into different opinions. Some people will say, you're too old to be talking about divorce. They'll ask why a woman your age would want to leave her husband after all these years. They'll say you should be embarrassed. They'll probably laugh behind your back." Jasmine immediately looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said it like that." "It's all right," Gloria replied softly. "People really would say those things." "Go on." Encouraged by her mother-in-law's response, Jasmine continued. "They'll call you selfish. They'll say you're abandoning your responsibilities as a wife, a mother, and a grandmother. They'll wonder why you'd throw away a marriage after spending half your life building it. But there will also be people who support you, or at least don't judge you. If they truly try to understand, they might realize that only the person trapped inside a situation knows how painful it really is." She paused before adding, "I don't know why you've decided to divorce Dad at this stage of your life. But I do know that making a decision like this can't be easy." Gloria listened without interrupting. "My parents weren't as happy as everyone thought either," Jasmine continued. "There were times they wanted a divorce. The only reason they stayed together was because their circumstances and business interests made it impossible to separate. I'm not telling you this because I think you should stay. I'm saying it because I believe you should follow your own heart and your own judgment." Those words struck a place deep inside Gloria that few people had ever reached. She already knew the world would judge her if she left her husband. She knew people would question her character and her choices. But hearing those possibilities spoken aloud by Jasmine still made her chest tighten. No one understood how much courage it had taken for her to even consider divorce. "Thank you," Gloria said quietly. "Your generation sees things differently than mine did." Her voice trembled slightly. "I've already made my decision. I won't take it back. Maybe I've failed as a mother by choosing myself at this point in life. If so, perhaps I'll spend another lifetime making up for it." "Please don't say that." Jasmine shook her head. "Everyone is selfish sometimes. If you want balance in your life, you have to take care of yourself first. I don't know everything about your marriage, but there's a man living near us who reminds me a lot of Dad. He's successful, respected, and admired by everyone. But behind closed doors, he abused his wife for years. They finally divorced recently. Now she looks happier than I've ever seen her. Most people criticize her because they only know one side of the story. The people who live next door understood how terrible her life really was. For the first time in years, Gloria wished she had a daughter. A daughter might have understood her in ways her sons never could. Women carried burdens that other women recognized instinctively. I understand, Gloria said, but I'm not looking to become younger or prettier or start over. I simply want to free both myself and your father. The two women fell into a comfortable silence. Without realizing it, Jasmine had begun seeing her mother-in-law in an entirely different light. Go home, Gloria said eventually. I want to be alone for a while, but no arguments. Tell Jason I already went home if he asks. That's not true. Then tell him I'm resting. Jasmine hesitated. Before today, she had often tried to avoid spending time with Gloria. Their relationship had never been hostile, but it had never been close either. Her own mother had spent years teaching her how to navigate relationships with in-laws, how to handle conflicts with a mother-in-law, and how to protect her marriage. Ironically, none of those lessons ever seemed necessary. Gloria rarely expressed opinions, rarely challenged anyone, and almost never inserted herself into family matters. Because of that, Jasmine and Nicole had spent years competing openly for influence within the family, without worrying about offending her. Only now did Jasmine realize how much pain existed behind that quiet exterior. After she left, Gloria drifted back to sleep. This time her dreams carried her far into the past. She found herself standing once again in the tiny wooden house from her childhood. The oak tree still stood in front of the yard. Her mother was there too, young, smiling, alive. Her mother stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her. You've suffered enough, baby. Gloria desperately wanted to respond. She wanted to ask where her mother had gone all those years ago. She wanted to know if she was still alive somewhere. She wanted answers. But in the dream, no words would come out. Her body refused to move. Her mother seemed to understand anyway. I know, she whispered. I know everything. Then she said something that sent a chill through Gloria. I've come to take you with me. Her mother reached for her hand. Would you like to come? Gloria tried to ask where they were going. Her mother simply smiled. Away from all of this, together they stepped onto a narrow bridge stretching across a wide river. The boards beneath their feet looked old and unstable. Halfway across, an invisible force suddenly pulled Gloria backward. No! Her mother tried to hold on, but their hands slipped apart. Gloria fought desperately to reach her again. She wanted to call out, wanted to scream. But no sound emerged. The harder she struggled, the farther away her mother became. Then she woke up. She found herself inside a large examination room. Nearby stood a machine similar to an MRI scanner. A nurse approached her immediately. You're awake. What happened? We completed several tests while you were resting. There are a few things we need to discuss with your family. Could you provide contact information for your husband or children? The nurse glanced down at the paperwork. It looks like nobody filled in the emergency contact section. Gloria still felt trapped between dream and reality. The nurse had to repeat herself several times before she fully understood. My family is busy, Gloria finally said. You don't need to call them. The nurse looked concerned. Well, some of these conversations are usually easier when family members are present. Anything you need to say can be said directly to me. Are you sure? Yes. The nurse hesitated before helping Gloria back to her room. By then, Gloria already sensed something was wrong. The unusual behavior of the staff, the extensive testing, the fact that she had awakened in a specialized treatment area. None of it felt normal. The headaches, the blurred vision, the ringing in her ears, the constant aches. She had blamed everything on age, but deep down she knew something else was happening. Lying in bed, she thought about the dream. Most of all, she remembered her mother saying she had come to take her away. The words lingered in her mind like a warning. Hours passed without the doctor returning. Eventually, Gloria grew restless and decided to walk outside. The fresh air felt better than staring at 4 hospital walls. After a short walk, the pain in her legs forced her to sit down on a bench. A few moments later, a bald little boy suddenly appeared beside her. Do you have any candy? Before Gloria could answer, he climbed onto the bench and sat next to her. I don't, she said. The boy immediately pulled a handful of brightly wrapped candies from his pocket. Then you can have one of mine. He dropped several pieces into her hand. Candy makes everything hurt less. Gloria laughed softly. Where are your parents? The boy shrugged. They went their separate ways. They never come visit me. And who are you here with? My grandpa. He pointed toward one of the hospital buildings. I snuck out. Gloria's smile faded. The child's optimism made her heart ache. Despite his illness and abandonment, he still found reasons to smile. Maybe you should let your grandfather know where you are. The boy nodded. Okay. After waving goodbye, he ran back toward the oncology building. Gloria watched him disappear. The missing hair told her more than enough. Cancer. The child was probably suffering far more than he let anyone see, yet he still smiled. The sight humbled her. She had grandchildren around the same age, but because Nicole never liked having Gloria around, she rarely spent time with them. Even so, she didn't dwell on it anymore. If relationships were distant now, then one day when she was gone, the children would probably forget about her altogether. The courtyard gradually filled with more patients and visitors. As evening approached, Gloria returned to her room. The same nurse spotted her immediately. "There you are. I told you not to wander off." Then she smiled with relief. "Good thing you came back. The doctor is still here." The nurse led her into the room. A middle-aged doctor pulled up a chair beside her bed. "Mrs. Johnson, I'm your attending physician. We'll be working together from now on." Gloria nodded politely. "When was your last full medical examination?" She thought for a moment. 3 or 4 years ago, maybe." The doctor frowned. "Have you experienced headaches, nausea, hearing loss, vision problems, or bone pain recently?" "Yes, all of those, most of them." She gave a small laugh. "I thought it was just old age. Whenever I went to the clinic, they gave me medication and sent me home." The doctor folded his hands together. "Routine checkups should happen at least every couple of years. My family's busy." Then she corrected herself. "No, that's not fair. My health is my responsibility." The doctor studied her quietly. "Ordinarily, I would discuss this with your family first. But since that isn't possible, I'll speak with you directly." Gloria met his eyes. "Please do. I'd rather know the truth." The doctor nodded slowly. "Very well." And then he prepared to tell her the news that would change everything. "Based on your recent symptoms and the results of your brain CT scan, we've discovered that you have brain cancer." The doctor paused briefly before continuing. "The tumor is malignant, and unfortunately it has been spreading very aggressively. Under normal circumstances, with the timeline suggested by your symptoms, we would expect the disease to be in stage 2. If it had been discovered then, treatment would have had a much higher chance of success. However, your cancer has already progressed to stage 3. There are signs that it has begun affecting other tissues in your body, which significantly increases the risk of recurrence even after treatment." Gloria sat motionless. The doctor lowered his eyes. "I'm sorry to have to tell you this." For several seconds, neither of them spoke. "Still, I want you to know that this is not hopeless. If you respond well to treatment, living another 3 to 5 years is entirely possible. Right now, the most important thing is preparing yourself mentally for surgery. We'll begin with medication to manage your symptoms, pain relievers, anti-seizure medication, and supportive treatment to help stabilize your condition. This folder contains the recommended treatment plan. You can review it and sign the necessary paperwork whenever you're ready." The doctor slid a stack of documents across the table. Gloria looked at them, but she couldn't really see them. The words blurred together. 3 to 5 years, brain cancer, surgery, stage 3. The phrases echoed through her mind as though they belonged to someone else. Oddly enough, she didn't cry, she didn't scream, she didn't ask why. She simply sat there in silence. Over the following days, volunteers and support staff frequently visited her room. One volunteer in particular often stopped by just to talk. Through those conversations, Gloria learned about many of the other patients receiving treatment at the hospital. Some had been fighting for 3 years, others for 5, a few even longer. Every one of them lived with constant physical pain and emotional exhaustion. Yet despite everything, they desperately wanted to survive. They clung to every possibility, every treatment option, every extra day they could gain. They all had reasons to keep fighting. Children, spouses, dreams, future plans. Something waiting for them beyond the hospital walls. Gloria often wondered what her own reason was. Was it her family, her children, her grandchildren, her friends, or was it herself? If Curtis and the rest of the family learned how sick she really was, would they finally care? Would they show her the love she had spent decades hoping for? Every time she thought about those questions, the pain in her head seemed to intensify. Her heart felt restless and heavy. The years of disappointment, loneliness, and emotional wounds seemed to have drained every last bit of strength from her. One night she didn't sleep at all. She lay awake until sunrise, making perhaps the most important decision of her life. Several days later, the cell phone sitting inside her bedside drawer began ringing. Gloria wasn't in the room. She had gone downstairs to pick up another round of medication. The amount of medicine prescribed to her was so large that it filled an entire shopping bag. People stared as she slowly carried multiple bags through the hospital corridor. Earlier that morning, she had told her doctors that she wanted to begin medication immediately and then continue treatment at a hospital in California. She even mentioned the name of a prestigious medical center and requested copies of all her records. The staff believed she was preparing for advanced treatment elsewhere. In reality, Gloria had completely different plans. She didn't want to spend whatever time she had left trapped inside hospitals. She understood the truth. The cancer wasn't curable. The treatments might slow its progress. They might ease the symptoms, but they wouldn't give her back her life. And the longer she remained sick, the more she would become a burden to everyone around her. Her sons would have to visit. Her daughters-in-law would complain. As for Curtis, he would simply miss having someone to cook his meals, clean his house, and manage his routines. If she disappeared, another person could eventually take her place. For the first time in decades, Gloria wanted to do something for herself, and maybe for other people too. By the time she reached her room, she was exhausted. She had barely lowered herself onto the bed when the phone started ringing again. She already knew who it was. "Hello? What took you so long to answer?" Curtis sounded annoyed before she could say another word. "Are you still at that hospital?" "Yes, you need to come home today." Gloria closed her eyes. "Why? Because we have guests coming tomorrow. The house isn't going to prepare itself." His tone remained cold and impatient. "You're taking up a hospital bed over a minor illness. Other people need those rooms too. Pack your things and leave today." She said nothing. "Next time, keep your phone nearby." "What year is this? I shouldn't have to chase you down just to get an answer." "I'm not coming to the hospital. Just come home." "Do you understand?" "I understand." The moment he heard her answer, Curtis hung up. The call ended with a sharp click. Only then did tears begin sliding down Gloria's face. She hadn't cried when she learned she was dying. She hadn't cried because of strangers. But somehow Curtis still possessed the ability to make her heart bleed. When did he actually need her? When guests came over and praised the discipline of his household. When people admired his obedient wife and successful family. When he felt overwhelmed and needed someone to listen. Years ago, Gloria loved hearing him talk about his day. But over time, she realized his conversations had become something else entirely. Criticism, mockery, judgment. Little reminders of how insignificant he believed she was. Anyone paying attention could see that whatever love Curtis once felt had long since been corrupted. In the beginning, both of them had dreamed of nothing more than a stable life. They worked hard, saved money, and hoped for a better future. Now they had everything they once wanted. Yet Gloria found herself longing for the years when they had almost nothing. At least back then, she believed they loved each other. She could no longer afford to waste time. After changing clothes, packing her belongings, and gathering every bag of medication, Gloria checked out of the hospital and headed home. Both of her sons and their wives were at work, so the house was empty when she arrived. For the first time in many years, she stepped through the front door without feeling any urgency to clean, cook, or prepare for anyone else. When Gloria returned home, the first thing she did was carry all of her belongings upstairs and carefully hide the medication. There was no way she could leave bags full of prescription drugs sitting around the house. Curtis would immediately become suspicious. If he discovered how serious her illness really was, he would almost certainly find a way to keep her under constant supervision and take away the little freedom she still had. Only a few days without a woman managing the household was enough to reveal the truth. Items were scattered everywhere. Things had been left out carelessly. The house was noticeably messier than usual. Gloria found herself wondering why Curtis had barely contacted her while she was hospitalized, yet suddenly remembered she existed the moment he needed the house cleaned for guests. She prayed the fear growing in her mind wasn't true. Moving quickly through the house, she inspected the bedroom, the bathroom, and everything else she could think of. Nothing seemed unusual until she passed the guest room on the first floor. The door was slightly open. That alone made her pause. The room had gone unused for years. Slowly, she pushed the door wider. Instead of the stale smell of a room left untouched, a faint jasmine fragrance drifted through the air. The scent was unmistakable. Someone had been staying there. Gloria switched on the light. The bed had clearly been slept in recently. On the pillow lay several strands of fine, short hair. Women's hair. For a long moment, she simply stared. Then the truth crashed down on her. While she had been lying alone in a hospital bed, another woman had spent the night under her roof. Deep down, she already knew who it was. The realization finally shattered whatever strength she had left. Gloria sank to the floor and cried, "Why? Why was this happening?" Had life decided she still hadn't suffered enough? Each sob felt like it was tearing through her chest. There was nobody there to hear her. Nobody there to understand. Eventually, the tears stopped. The damage was already done. If she blamed anyone, she blamed herself for refusing to act sooner. She had spent years tolerating behavior she should have confronted from the beginning. That night, for the first time in more than 30 years of marriage, Gloria refused to sleep beside her husband. "I've been waking up several times during the night lately," she said, "and I'm constantly getting up to use the bathroom. I think I'll sleep in the guest room so I don't disturb you." Curtis frowned. Clearly, he didn't like the idea. "I'm only thinking about your comfort," Gloria continued. "The doctor said these things might take time to improve." Curtis studied her for a moment. If that's what you want. Without another word, he picked up his reading glasses, put them on, and returned to his phone. Lately, he spent more and more time staring at that screen. Even Gloria knew that smartphones were used for far more than phone calls these days. People socialized on them. They flirted on them. They built entire relationships through them. Perhaps Curtis was doing exactly that. The thought hurt. Yet at the same time, it strangely made her decision easier. If another woman already occupied part of his heart, leaving would be less painful for both of them. That night marked the first time in decades that they slept in separate rooms. Neither of them said much, but both understood, whether consciously or not, that something fundamental had changed. The separation had already begun. The following morning, Gloria woke before sunrise. Despite her illness, she still cleaned the house and prepared everything for the guests Curtis had invited over. She had performed these duties so many times that the routine was second nature. Unfortunately, her body no longer moved as quickly as it once had. By early afternoon, she heard the front door open. The guests had arrived. Rather than greeting them, Gloria remained in the kitchen preparing fruit platters and arranging desserts. The lively conversations coming from the living room barely registered. Then a voice sounded behind her. "Ma'am, could I get a glass of water?" Without turning around, Gloria pointed toward a cabinet. "Glasses are in the cupboard. The refrigerator has cold water." The young man thanked her enthusiastically and drank 2 full glasses. Apparently, he was thirsty. Instead of leaving, however, he stayed. "Wow," he said, watching her work. "You're really talented. The way you arrange fruit is beautiful." A young woman soon appeared beside him. "Ethan, what are you doing?" "Nothing. I was just admiring her work." The woman glanced at Gloria from head to toe. Then her expression changed. "Oh," she seemed to reach a conclusion immediately. "You must be Mr. Johnson's housekeeper." The two of them walked away before Gloria could respond. She remained standing there. Housekeeper. The assumption wasn't surprising. She dressed simply. She spent most of her time in the kitchen. Guests rarely saw her anywhere else. Even during company dinners, she was never invited to sit at the table. The conversations were always about business and investments. Subjects she wasn't expected to understand. Eventually, Curtis stopped wanting her around his colleagues altogether. But today was different. Today, Gloria intended to see the woman she suspected had become her husband's mistress. When she finally entered the dining room, her attention immediately settled on one person. Vanessa Brooks. The woman was striking. Her short hair framed her face perfectly. She carried herself with confidence and grace. Though she and Gloria were nearly the same age, standing beside each other made Gloria feel decades older. Vanessa looked vibrant, alive, untouched by time. Through snippets of conversation, Gloria learned that Vanessa was the CEO of a successful real estate development company. She wasn't wearing a wedding ring, though Gloria had no idea whether she was divorced, widowed, or simply unmarried. When everyone gathered around the table, Curtis seemed surprised to see his wife joining them. Under normal circumstances, he would have found a way to send her back into the kitchen. Today, he didn't. "Thank you all for coming," Curtis announced. "I wanted us to enjoy a relaxed dinner together. No business talk tonight, no toast, no hierarchy. Just good food and good company." Applause filled the room. Curtis raised his glass. "And before we begin, I'd like to recognize someone who played a major role in helping our company secure that partnership with a major national corporation." He turned toward Vanessa. "Ms. Brooks, everyone." Another round of applause followed. Vanessa stood gracefully. "Thank you, Curtis. Honestly, I only provided a small amount of assistance. The real credit belongs to your management team and employees. Their professionalism and dedication impressed me tremendously." Her voice was calm and confident. "I've learned a great deal from working with your organization. Hopefully this partnership will open new opportunities for all of us moving forward." Everyone applauded again. Gloria listened quietly. There was no denying it. Vanessa was intelligent, accomplished, elegant, and respected. The type of woman people naturally admired. The type of woman capable of making a man forget the wife waiting at home. As the evening progressed, conversations became increasingly lively. "Seriously, Vanessa," one employee laughed. "What's your secret?" "You never seem to age," Vanessa smiled. "Good sleep, occasional spa days, and taking care of yourself. That's impossible. We work too much for that." Laughter spread around the table. Someone turned to Curtis. "Boss, you're looking great too. Retirement doesn't suit you. Maybe you'll start another company. Take us with you if you do." Curtis laughed. "I've worked long enough. It's time to enjoy life." One employee grinned mischievously. "You still look young enough to get married again." The room exploded with laughter. To Gloria's horror, Curtis laughed harder than anyone, and for a brief second his eyes drifted toward Vanessa. The gesture lasted only a moment, but Gloria saw it. Everyone else continued joking. "What if your wife hears that?" "Yeah, she'll make you sleep on the couch." Someone else suddenly looked around. "Actually, where is Mrs. Johnson?" Several curious faces turned toward Curtis. He never answered. The wife who had spent decades supporting him was no longer someone he felt proud to introduce. Gloria quietly stood up and left the table. Nobody noticed, or perhaps nobody cared. Back in the kitchen, she found herself thinking about the dreams she once had. Years ago, she imagined growing old beside the man she loved, living a simple life, traveling, watching sunsets together. Now that dream belonged only to her. Curtis had already abandoned it. Later that evening, after the guests left for the after party and the house finally emptied, Gloria cleaned the entire mess by herself. She wasn't worried that Curtis wouldn't come home that night. That had stopped surprising her long ago. The next morning, she was awakened by the loud voice of Marcus calling for her from downstairs. "Mom! Mom!" Marcus's voice echoed through the house, pulling Gloria from a restless sleep. She rubbed her forehead and walked toward the stairs. "What is it? Have you seen Dad?" "No. He went out with coworkers last night and never came home." Marcus's expression tightened. "Why haven't you been answering your phone?" "Jason and I have been calling nonstop." "What happened?" "Dad's in the hospital." Gloria froze. "He got into a fight." "A fight?" "He was drinking. Somebody hit him. He's in emergency care right now. Hurry and pack some clothes and paperwork. We need to go." Unlike the panic in her son's voice, Gloria remained strangely calm. Curtis had spent years intimidating people, but she had never known him to get into physical fights outside the house. Even when he drank too much, he usually maintained control. Still, if Curtis was hospitalized, it might create an opportunity for her to leave quietly. She needed to see the situation for herself first. Fortunately, he had been taken to a different hospital than the one where Gloria had received her diagnosis. The last thing she needed was for her doctors to recognize her and expose her condition. "How is he?" "The doctors are still examining him," Jason replied once they arrived. "We only got here a little while ago. Was nothing to do except wait." As Gloria looked around the waiting area, she immediately noticed Vanessa Brooks sitting alone on a bench. Most of the coworkers had already gone home. Why was Vanessa still here? Both Marcus and Jason seemed familiar with her and quickly walked over. "Thank you for calling the ambulance," Marcus said. "Really, thank you." Vanessa slowly stood. Her face looked exhausted. "No," she whispered. "This is my fault." Tears immediately filled her eyes. "If I hadn't been there, none of this would have happened." She looked genuinely heartbroken. Anyone who didn't know better would have assumed Curtis was her husband rather than Gloria's. "What happened exactly?" Jason asked. Vanessa wiped her tears. "After dinner at your parents' house, everyone decided to continue the celebration at a karaoke lounge. We stayed out until almost 3 in the morning. Everyone was drunk. Curtis stayed behind to make sure people got home safely. A group of men started harassing me. He stepped in to defend me. One thing led to another and a fight broke out." She lowered her head. "This is all because of me." Both sons exchanged uncomfortable glances. Officially, Vanessa was only a business associate. Yet, she had spent the entire night with their father. And now she was crying in a hospital waiting room over him. Even Jason seemed unsure what to think. Gloria simply stood there quietly. By noon, the family was finally allowed to see Curtis. He looked terrible. 5 stitches ran across his forehead. One arm was immobilized. Bruises and cuts covered much of his body. Gloria stared at him without feeling much sympathy. She had never imagined anything outside of business could make Curtis lose control so completely. The moment Vanessa entered the room, she rushed directly to his bedside. "Curtis," her voice trembled with worry. "How are you feeling?" "Do you know who I am?" She fired off questions one after another. Curtis answered patiently despite his condition. "I'm fine. You're not fine. It's just a few injuries." Then he looked at her carefully. "Did you get checked out? Are you hurt anywhere?" Not only Gloria noticed the exchange. Marcus and Jason saw it too. Nobody needed to say anything. The concern between them felt far too intimate. Only then did Curtis seem to realize his family had been standing there the entire time. "Vanessa," he said gently, "you should go home and rest. I can stay." "No. Let Marcus drive you home." "That's not necessary. Take care of yourself." Their conversation flowed with an ease that made Gloria's stomach twist. Marcus clearly disliked the situation as well. When Vanessa finally left, she nodded politely at the sons, but barely acknowledged Gloria at all. The moment she disappeared, Nicole and Jasmine arrived. The room filled with concern and conversation. Meanwhile, Gloria slipped quietly into the background, organizing Curtis's belongings and putting away clothes like an invisible servant. Later, while she was washing fruit in the hospital bathroom, Jason stepped inside. "Mom," she turned, "you don't need to do that. Jasmine can handle it." "I'm used to it," Jason hesitated. "About Vanessa?" He lowered his voice. "I really think you're misunderstanding things. She probably feels guilty because Dad got hurt helping her." Gloria smiled sadly. "Maybe. They're not having an affair." Jason sounded as though he was trying to convince himself as much as her. "I'm glad you still trust your family," Gloria said softly. Trust is a good thing. Then her expression changed, but understand something, Jason. I trusted your father more than anyone for most of my life. Jason fell silent. If he has betrayed me, Gloria continued, I won't let it go. For decades she had swallowed every hurt and every disappointment. She had accepted more than anyone should, but there were limits. She could already feel those limits approaching. The headache returned suddenly, sharper than before. She pressed a hand against her temple. There were so many things she wanted to tell her sons. So many truths she wanted them to know. But she refused to leave them carrying unnecessary guilt. If things ever become difficult, Jason said quietly, I'll talk to Dad when he gets better. Gloria nodded. I know. Over the next several days, she became Curtis's primary caregiver. Funny how illness revealed who truly stood beside you. Visitors flowed in and out of the room constantly. Some came out of genuine concern. Others came only because Curtis was an important businessman. One afternoon, Gloria left the hospital under the pretense of running errands. Instead, she stopped at the county family courthouse. Her hands trembled as she requested the paperwork, divorce petition. She stared at the documents for a long time after receiving them. Only one signature remained missing, Curtis's. If he refused, she would file on her own. If necessary, she would find another way. Either way, she was done waiting. When she returned to the hospital later that day, she stopped cold outside Curtis's room. Vanessa was there, holding a cup of water to his lips, laughing softly, acting as though she belonged beside him. Something inside Gloria finally snapped. What exactly is going on here? Her voice remained calm. That somehow made it more frightening. Both Curtis and Vanessa startled. Vanessa nearly dropped the cup. When I'm gone, Gloria continued, you invite your mistress here to play happy couple. Curtis's face darkened instantly. Watch your mouth. Vanessa stood. This is a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Gloria laughed bitterly. Really? Curtis pointed angrily toward the door. You've completely lost your mind. Have I? You disappear all afternoon while I'm lying in this bed and then come back making ridiculous accusations. Vanessa stepped forward. Please don't fight because of me. Yet despite her words, she made no effort to leave. Stay where you are, Curtis told her immediately. Then he turned back toward Gloria. Apologize. Gloria stared at him. Excuse me, you heard me. His voice rose. Apologize to Vanessa. The demand was so absurd that Gloria almost laughed. If I call our children in here right now, she said, pulling out her phone, what do you think they'll say about the relationship between you two? Before she could finish, Vanessa rushed forward and knocked the phone from her hand. The device hit the floor with a sharp crack. The speed of her reaction said more than any explanation ever could. Curtis exploded. Do you know how hard I've worked to provide for this family? His chest rose and fell rapidly. I spent my entire life making sure you had everything you needed. Gloria's eyes filled with tears. Then why didn't you hire a housekeeper? The question stunned him. If money is all that matters, why didn't you hire someone to cook, clean, and raise your children? For a moment, nobody spoke. What I needed, Gloria continued, was a family. Her voice shook. You forgot that a long time ago. She pulled the divorce papers from her bag. I'm done. The documents landed on the hospital bed. Sign them. Curtis stared at the papers, as though they were written in another language. You can't be serious. I should have left years ago. Her voice broke. Every time you hit me. Every time you humiliated me. Every time you convinced me that I deserved it. Curtis looked genuinely shocked. Gloria, I spent decades letting you rewrite my reality. She shoved a pen into his hand. Signed. Vanessa stood frozen. Jason and Marcus had not yet returned. For the first time in decades, nobody could save Curtis from the consequences of his own actions. His pride wouldn't allow him to back down, not in front of Vanessa, not after being challenged, not after having his authority questioned. Fine, he thought, let her leave. She'll come crawling back eventually. She always does. Without another word, Curtis signed. The scratch of pen against paper sounded louder than any argument. Gloria stared at the signature. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Then she realized what she was holding. Freedom. The final lifeline she had been reaching toward for years. She folded the papers carefully and placed them back into her bag. Without looking at either of them again, she walked out. Behind her remained a wounded husband, a waiting mistress, and an entire life she no longer wanted. By the time Gloria reached home, it was almost 10 o'clock at night. Her headache had returned with brutal force. She ignored it. Tonight, more than anything else, she needed to leave. She packed quickly. There was surprisingly little to take. Most of her life had been spent inside that house, yet she owned almost nothing. A few outfits, a few keepsakes, a handful of memories. That was all. As she moved through the rooms, every corner carried a reminder of the past. The kitchen, the living room, the staircase, the bedroom. Everywhere she looked, memories tried to pull her back. Walking away sounded simple when spoken aloud. In reality, letting go required extraordinary courage. Only those who had done it could truly understand. Years ago, Gloria chose the pain that lasted forever. Now she was choosing the pain that happened only once. The scars would remain, but scars were proof that healing had begun. Eventually, she sat alone at the kitchen table with a glass of water. For a long time, she simply stared into the darkness. Then she stood and began writing notes. She placed them throughout the house, one here, one there. Small messages scattered among decades of memories. Afterwards, she cleaned the house one final time. When everything was finished, she lay down on the bed and switched on the old radio she had listened to for years. A late-night program was playing. A young woman was reading a letter about unrequited love. She spoke about loving someone who never loved her back, about staying awake all night worrying about a person who shared his deepest thoughts with someone else, about realizing that no matter how much effort she gave, she would never become the person he chose. As Gloria listened, her eyelids slowly grew heavy. The girl on the radio was young enough to walk away before wasting a lifetime. Gloria smiled faintly. Perhaps she should have done the same. Then sleep finally came. And with it, the certainty that tomorrow she would say goodbye to this house forever. In a small rural town in South Georgia, a woman knelt in the middle of a dry patch of soil, working patiently beneath the afternoon sun. She was turning over the hardened earth in a small garden behind a modest house when another woman walking by stopped to greet her. "You're the new lady who moved here recently, right?" Gloria Johnson looked up and smiled warmly. "That's right. I've only been here a few days. I'm still getting used to everything. If I make any mistakes, I hope you'll help me out." The older woman, whose skin had been darkened by years of working outdoors, waved Gloria over to sit beneath a large tree. "So you're from the city? A long time ago. And where's your husband? Your children? What made you come all the way out here and work this hard by yourself?" Gloria lowered her eyes. "I live alone," the woman stared. "No husband, no children." The answer wasn't entirely true, but Gloria had no desire to explain her past. Most of the people living in the area were elderly, working-class families, or children being raised by grandparents while their parents worked elsewhere. Life was difficult, yet people seemed happier than many of the wealthy families Gloria had known. There was something comforting about that. As a child, her mother had once brought her to this region. The memory had remained with her all these years. Back then, reaching the town required navigating rough roads and steep hills. Now highways and bridges connected it to the outside world. For Gloria, it felt like the perfect place to disappear. "You don't look like someone who belongs out here," the woman laughed. "Your skin's too nice. You look like you spent your whole life indoors." Gloria laughed too. "I'm thinking about opening a small convenience store." "A store? Nothing fancy. Just snacks, candy, and a few essentials for the local kids." The woman's eyes immediately lit up. "Well, if you're serious about staying, I'll come keep you company." "Deal." That simple conversation marked the beginning of Gloria's new life. A tiny convenience store, a brutally honest new friend, and a fresh start she never imagined she would find. Back in Atlanta, meanwhile, Curtis Johnson's life was beginning to unravel. After signing the divorce papers, Vanessa Brooks gradually took over the role of caring for him during his recovery. Gloria's absence went largely unnoticed at first. A day passed, then another, then several more. Only when Marcus and Jason arrived asking where their mother was did the family finally realize she was gone. Panic spread quickly. Curtis rushed upstairs to the master bedroom. The room felt empty, cold. For the first time in decades, one half of the house no longer belonged to anyone. It was Jason who eventually noticed a box sitting in the middle of the dining table. Inside was a letter and several seemingly meaningless objects, old sewing supplies, expired discount coupons, a few pieces of worn jewelry, random keepsakes nobody understood. At least nobody except Curtis. The moment he saw them, something inside him tightened. To everyone else, they looked like junk. To Gloria, they had been memories, dreams, pieces of a life she had treasured. The coupons came from years when they couldn't afford luxuries. The jewelry represented promises they once made to each other. She had kept every one of them. After reading the letter, Curtis finally understood. Gloria had really left, and she wasn't planning to come back. "Where is Mom?" Marcus grabbed the letter. "What did she say?" Curtis crushed the paper in his fist. "She's gone." "What? She left." The room exploded with questions. "What do you mean she left? Where did she go? Why didn't you stop her?" Curtis's face darkened. "She wanted a divorce." The sons stared at him in disbelief. "You signed it?" "She disappeared for half a day, came back with divorce papers, and I signed them." Marcus felt sick. "Why didn't you tell us?" Curtis slammed his hand onto the table. "Because it's none of your business." Jason looked horrified. "Dad, call her." "No, you have to." "No." His voice became even colder. "If either of you brings her back, don't bother coming back to the company." The threat hung heavily in the air. Both sons had spent their entire lives following Curtis's orders. Now they faced a choice: their future careers or their mother. After Marcus and Jason left, Curtis lost his temper completely. He smashed dishes, threw objects. yelled at nobody. He couldn't understand it. The wife who had spent decades obeying him had actually walked away. The mansion suddenly felt enormous, too quiet, too empty. There was no woman humming softly in the kitchen while preparing dinner. No one organizing the house, no one waiting for him. Then something drifted down from the refrigerator door, a sticky note. Curtis picked it up. Beef should always be cooked thoroughly. Drink 1 glass of soy milk every morning. The note was one of dozens Gloria had left throughout the house. Even after everything, she had still worried about him. Still cared enough to leave instructions for whoever came after her. That realization hurt far more than he expected. Months later, Curtis officially handed control of the company to Jason. Most people assumed Marcus would inherit everything. Instead, Marcus openly defied his father and devoted himself to finding Gloria. For the first time in his life, he chose his mother. People often said Marcus was the child most like Curtis. Ambitious, cold-driven. But perhaps that was exactly why he recognized the danger of becoming the same man. He wanted a different future, a different family, a different ending. Eventually, his search led him to a small rural town in South Georgia. He parked his car at the bottom of a hill and continued on foot. The roads were rough. The summer heat was relentless. Sweat soaked through his clothes. Stopping at a tiny roadside convenience store, he bought a bottle of water. An elderly woman sitting outside immediately started talking to him. "Well now," she laughed. "A handsome city man like you looks mighty lost out here." Marcus forced a smile. He was in no mood for jokes. As he turned to leave, something hanging beside the store caught his attention. Several handmade bead bracelets. For some reason, they looked familiar. "Who made these?" The woman glanced over. "My friend used to. She passed away." Marcus froze. Something inside him stirred. "I'll take all of them." The old woman laughed. "If you buy the whole lot, $50 will do." Then she added casually, "I'll tell her spirit to watch over you." Marcus chuckled despite himself. "Then tell her to help me find my mother." The old woman stopped smiling. "You're looking for your mother?" "Yes." "How long?" 3 years. The woman narrowed her eyes. "There was a woman who came here around that time." Marcus's heartbeat quickened. "What was her name?" "What's your mother's name?" "Gloria Johnson." He quickly pulled out a photograph. The old woman snatched it from his hand. The moment she saw it, her entire expression changed. Without saying a word, she hurriedly closed the store and dragged Marcus toward the small house behind it. "Come inside. What's going on?" "Just come." The house was simple and worn. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Marcus followed her into the living room. Then she pointed toward a memorial table. "Light a candle." "For who?" "For your mama." Marcus stopped breathing. His eyes locked onto the framed photograph, standing at the center of the memorial display. It was Gloria, smiling happy, alive in the picture, gone in reality. His legs nearly gave out beneath him. The old woman placed a candle in his hand. "I honestly thought none of y'all would ever come." Marcus could barely hear her. The world around him had gone silent. The mother he had spent 3 years searching for was gone. Gone before he ever had the chance to apologize. The old woman quietly stepped outside and left him alone. Only then did Marcus finally break. He collapsed into a chair and cried. Not the controlled tears of a successful businessman. Not the restrained grief of an adult. The broken sobs of a son who had arrived too late. Much too late. Later, sitting beside the old woman outside, Marcus finally found the strength to ask the question he feared most. "What happened?" "She came here 3 summers ago." The woman sighed. "She was sick." Marcus looked up sharply. "Sick? Brain cancer." The words hit harder than any physical blow. "She knew?" "Oh, she knew." The woman nodded. "She took medication for years. By the 3rd year, she could barely get out of bed." Marcus felt like he couldn't breathe. "Why didn't she go back to the hospital?" "She didn't want to." The old woman looked toward the distant hills. "She said she was tired." Marcus lowered his head. "Brain cancer." His mother had been dying the entire time, and nobody in the family knew. Or perhaps nobody had cared enough to notice. "She spent most of her money helping people," the old woman continued. "Cooking meals, supporting families, buying supplies for children. Every dollar she could spare went to someone else." That sounded exactly like Gloria. Even after everything, she spent her final years giving. "Did she leave any final wishes?" The woman smiled sadly. "Not really." Then she added, "She just liked helping people." Marcus sat quietly for a long time. Eventually he nodded. "I'll continue her work." The old woman smiled. That would make her happy. A few days later, Gloria finally returned home. Not alive, but home. Marcus brought her remains back to Atlanta and laid her to rest beneath a beautiful apple tree. Simple, peaceful, exactly the way she would have wanted. Then he told Curtis and Jason everything. The cancer, the loneliness, the years she spent suffering alone, the charity work, the quiet life she built after leaving. He wanted them to know. Not because it would bring Gloria back, but because they deserved to live with the truth. And perhaps with the guilt that came with it. As for Marcus, he knew he could never repay what he owed his mother, not in this lifetime. Maybe not in any lifetime. All he could do now was continue the work she started, help others, give back, live differently. Perhaps, somewhere beyond this world, Gloria had finally reunited with the mother she spent her entire life missing. Perhaps she was finally at peace. And perhaps that peace was the happy ending she had deserved all along.